call on the election. We didn't get a call on the election until several days later in the last election cycle, but the market will start to suss it out, depending on how ballots are coming in some of the key swing states, whether it's Pennsylvania, which we will know probably within that later that night, to start to put some chips on the table on where the outcome could be.
I'm just always struck because Arizona is talking about potentially 10 to 13 days, and if say it came down to that state, maybe this is a market that's trying to price in potentially what policy might look like out of Washington. You have two likely scenarios. What are they?
Two likely scenarios. Now, I want to preface that we think that is too close to call. It's 50-50 coin flip. But the two likely scenarios we think is Harris with a divided government and then Trump with a Republican sweep. Now, that will yield different outcomes in markets. A Harris with a divided government, probably more status quo, a continuation of the Biden initiatives. We could see a bit of a relief rally, though, in some of the renewable names that have been under pressure. And then Trump with a sweep, again, is going to be, we think it's slightly positive, but honestly, it's a tough call because you have competing policies here. Not only the possibility of lower corporate taxes and easier regulation, but then the tariffs.
You do think it has the potential to shape sector level performance, though? Because there are some people on this program that come on and say it doesn't really matter. We look at previous cycles, stocks go up. Do you disagree with that?
We do disagree with that. It does matter at the sector level. Consumer discretionary. Remember, during the last, trade war, it came under pressure because if you have supply chains abroad, you're facing some incremental potential costs, and the decision has to be made. Do you absorb those costs of higher tax, or do you pass it on to the consumer? Last time, companies absorbed some of that. So parts of consumer discretionary, as well as even parts of tech and industrial, could be under pressure from higher tariffs.
Chris Verona, strategist, was on the program earlier this morning, and he talked about a pro-cyclical tilt in equities, the performance that he's seen in financials and discretionary versus staples. Would you suggest then at this point that's been more about the underlying fundamentals, the earnings we've seen, the economic data, than maybe about the politics and next week?
It's a combination. I would more lean into, particularly for financials, and its fundamentals. I mean, we've had a pretty strong earnings season. Capital markets seems to start to recovering, and we have a curve that's starting to steepen, and the fact that's lowering interest rates, and so that could alleviate some pressures on deposit costs going forward. So it's a combination of things, but we think at the end of the day, and we've been saying a lot to our clients, that it's more about the profits than the politics right now.
We're 20 minutes away, there and about, from this jobs report. And as you listen to the commentary from corporate executives, how much do you see a desire to hire, but kind of a waiting period to really understand what the framework is going to look like?
That's a great question, Lisa, because what we've heard in the second and third quarter earnings season is that some companies have been delaying CapEx as well as hiring intentions due to the political uncertainty. And so we'll see what the print is at 8:30. We know that it could be noisy, and I do agree that the risk is to the upside. And if we get above 200, the market might not like that because there's a repricing in the rates market.
So that's what I wanted to go. Is that a negative read-through? Have we reached the point where there is a negative read-through, where good news is bad news in risk assets because of that rate overlay?
Absolutely. We do think that there's some truth to that. I mean, right now, the market is pricing in 40 basis points of cuts for the rest of the year. We think that that's fair. We're looking for 50. So the 80% probability of a December cut is reasonable. That could get taken off of the table if we do see a very strong payrolls, and that could create some headwinds to some segments of the market.
Nadia, thank you. It's good to see you. As always, Nadia Lover there of UBS. The first of three big events over the next week. This morning, payrolls 20 minutes away. Then next week on Tuesday, an election in America. Then 2 days later, a Federal Reserve decision. With an update on stories elsewhere, with your Bloomberg brief, is Danny Berger. Hey, Danny.
Hey, John. Oil prices rising after a report that Iran is weighing a possible attack on Israel in the coming days. Axios reporting that Iran is planning a strike through militias it backs in Iraq, carried out with drones and ballistic missiles. Oil tumbled at the start of the week after Israel's limited strikes on Iran, which led to a war premium quickly unwinding, though analysts at the time warned that the market had relaxed too quickly. The latest data out of China indicates that the economy has stabilized following Beijing's stimulus push. Official and private measures of factory activity in October exceeded analyst expectations. The Taishan Manufacturing and Purchasing Managers Index unexpectedly rose to 50.3 last month, 49.3 in September. Meanwhile, home sales saw their first rise this year. General Atlantic is leading a $500 million funding round for AI-based marketing tech startup Insider. Insider plans to use the funds to expand its business in the U.S., develop its software, and explore potential acquisitions. The company was founded in Istanbul in 2012 and now has over 1,500 customers with major brands like Samsung and Walt Disney. And that's your Bloomberg Brief. John.
Hey, Danny, thank you. Appreciate it. Up next on the programme, the Morning Calls Plus. We'll catch up with Michael Collins of PG Fixed Income. With the October payrolls report just around the corner, those numbers drop in about 18 minutes' time. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
Ways on the heartbeat of the tech sector.
Spread across global markets.
Real-time data aspect is going to be
We're going to bring you expert analysis on that. Sure. Don't miss Bloomberg's interview with the
Morning, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Tom McKenzie in London. These are the stories that set your agenda.
Taking you from the U.S. market's close to the overnight session in Asia. We'll walk you through what you need to know to kickstart the European trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in every weekday at 6 a.m. London time, only on Bloomberg Television. From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live every trading day. Balance of Power live around the world every weekday, only on Bloomberg.
Live from New York City, welcome to the programme. Big 30 minutes coming up. Equity futures going into all of that. Positive by 0.4% on the S&P 500. Bond yields higher by a basis point or two. The 10-year, 429.87. Let's get you some morning calls with Big Tech in focus. First up, Baird raising its price target on Intel to 25, expecting faster gross margin expansion. That stock higher in the pre-market by close to 7%. Your second call from JP Morgan raising its price target on Amazon to 250, saying it's comfortable with current capex given a clear path to AI monetization. That stock is higher by 7.3%. And finally, Barclays lowering its price target on Apple to 184, citing weak revenue growth expectations. That stock moving in the other direction, negative 1.7. Turning to the bond market with payrolls just around the corner, Treasuries posting their worst monthly loss since 2022, ahead of three key events over the next week. Mike Collins of PG Fixed Income joins us now for more. Mike Collins, a major move in this bond market. And I went back just a few weeks to some notes that you put out before you joined us last. And it was going into the last payrolls report. And you said the biggest risk was skewed towards higher rates on an upside surprise. That was 50 basis points ago on a 2-year and a 10-year, Mike. What's the balance of risk going into
？SPA 360，我生平第一台家用主机，从2009年购入至今也已经10年了。这次的影片就来回顾 SPA 360上那些让人难忘的游戏和回忆。刚升上大二的那年，大家在宿舍总是闲来无事的看动画、抓游戏。某次因缘际会之下，我在笔电上玩到了20554。对已经许久没有接触游戏的我，就像是开启了新世界的大门一样。多变的攻略方式，耐玩度相当高的游戏设计， 和惊心动魄的冒险旅程让我久久不能自拔。那时就已经有了《恶灵古堡5》的相关消息，游戏预计会在当时的次世代主机，也就是 PS3 和 S83上推出，因此让我有了购入家用主机的念头。当然，一台主机对一个整天混吃等死的大学生而言是一笔很可观的开销。还记得当时的我拿起了上课使用的笔记本，一一的写下 PS3 和 S830各自的优与缺，来决定要买哪一台主机。而我的一名室友家里有台初代 S8，因此在他的劝说和洗脑之下，加上当时市面上的 PS3普遍已经无法相容 PS2这边，所以我选择了 S8360。作为微软参战家用机大战的第二台主机 ，S8360的360阐述了将用户作为整个娱乐体验的中心的概念。另有一说是和竞争对手索尼的 PS3相比，若叫 S82，在气势上就输了一截。入手主机大概是接近期中考周的时候了吧，我斩钉截铁的宰了养好久的猪公，先去邮局换了钱，接着就到光华商场买了一台恶灵古堡5的同捆机。12张小朋友换来2个10元铜板的画面，到现在仍记忆犹新。就像刚拿到圣诞礼物的孩子们一样，回宿舍后我和室友很兴奋的开箱，洁白的主机由层塑料袋所包覆着，上面用中英日韩等多国语言写了欢迎的字样。我就喜欢游戏厂商们在这些细节上有发挥的巧思和惊喜。接着把主机接到了宿舍的音响管电视上面，是当时我们唯一仅有的输出设备。看到 S830的开机画面，我迫不及待要来玩《恶灵古堡5》。在开头的关卡，我试了一下射击的操作，强烈的震动马上就反馈在手把上面。当时习惯用199山寨手把的我又惊又喜。有了之前《恶灵古堡4》所累积的游戏经验，玩起《恶灵古堡5》很快就进入状况了。接着跳出了第一个成就15区的 A Cut Above。当时的线上商店不论是游戏的标价还是点数的储值，都使用微软点数这个东西。1600点的微软点数约等同台币680的价格。也因为这样，我一开始在把这成就分数误以为是可以买游戏所使用的点数，事后才知道这只是误会一场。那时家用主机还只是一个很小众的市场，大家最疯的不是 MMORPG 和魔兽3国进场，就是 Facebook 的开心农场。班上有几位同学虽然有 PSP， 也是因为 PSP 可以改机玩盗版才买的。甚至有同学曾说了像你买好几篇游戏的钱就能抵一台主机了，所以改机才划算好吗之类的话。可见当时各种正版相关的版权意识尚未普及。那时的 S8360有了3红的问题，一旦发生就只能送回原厂维修。原本在入手主机时我还犹豫要不要改机，但我很怕3红发生，1万多的主机就要没了，所以当时我决定只好继续买正版片了。只是在买了几片游戏后，自己的心态和想法也开始有了微妙的变化。能用实际的行动支持自己喜欢的游戏，和过去在电脑上抓破解版相比，给了我一种相当满足且充实的感觉。甚至经历了漫长的游戏时速后，再回头看看当初买游戏所花费的钱，好像也不是那么贵了。当然，这版游戏的开销并不小，我几乎一个月只能买1-2片游戏。但不得不提的是 ，S8360有着一样前无古人后无来者的优点，那就是在 S8 Live Arcade 上所推出的下载版游戏，通通都有试玩版可以游玩。对于没有足够零用钱买游戏的我，这设计简直就是沙漠中绿洲一般的存在，也让我开始注意到这些看似不起眼的游戏，却蕴含了不出各种游戏大作的魅力。如果把家用机市场中文化的历史摊开来看，就会发现微软在 X830早期几乎卯足了全力。当时只要是微软本家的游戏，不管是战争机器、最后一战还是神鬼预言，都不需要担心玩不到中文版的问题。那个年代，如果你在网络上说我希望能玩到中文版的《一城余生》，多半只会先惹来一阵嘲笑，再叫你去学英文还比较快。在这样子的黑暗时代，微软却肯如此用心的耕耘中文市场，这种感动真的让人没齿难忘。除了中文化外，当年台湾微软在推广和行销上也可说是不遗余力。例如成就分数只要突破36000分，就能获得真强者夹克件，各种大大小小的体验活动，以及只要是一定规模的电器卖场和游戏专卖店，都不难看到 S830试玩机台的影子。每次去小卖店，都会习惯随手拿走一本每个月都会推出的哈烧志，里面总是用图文并茂的方式，用心介绍各种新游戏的相关资讯，让我光是用看的也能过干瘾。虽然大家都说 S830的连线机制有多好多棒，但老实说，我不喜欢和素未谋面的人玩游戏，更别提当时的金会员只有线上游玩和语音派对的功能，因此完全没有任何鼓励我买金会员的诱因。我最喜欢的还是那些剧情和创意取向的纯单机游戏，而在 S830上的确让我接触到了不少这类型的游戏。围绕着不死之身展开的 RPG《失落的奥德赛》，虽然在阵斗系统没有什么特别的突出之处，就是很单纯的回合制 RPG。但铺陈良好的剧情和精彩的过场动画，特别是以电子小说形式呈现的千年之梦， 讲述主角凯姆千年来曾碰到的各种人事物，优美的文笔和富含情绪的故事都让人难以忘怀。可玩性相当高的 Metroidvania 游戏《爱与帝国》，玩家扮演主角杰森，为了寻找意外失踪的女友，而深入埋藏于地下的秘密设施。广大可探索式地图、多样化的武器选择，以及循序渐进获得的特殊能力，总是能让玩家在通关的过程中保持新鲜感。被国外游戏媒体誉为《萨尔达传说》和《战神》合体的末世骑士，爽快的战斗系统、难度恰到好处的关卡解谜，以及风格强烈的关卡场景和人设，虽然是很标准的一轮游戏，但整体游戏的长度和破关后的满足感足以掩盖这样缺点的。至今仍是我最喜欢的横向卷轴游戏《Explosion Man》。简单的操作，不简单的关卡，充满了幽默感的游戏风格，还有那丧心病狂、一死掉就整关重来的哈扣模式，在通关的那刻所带来的巨大成就感，至今能让人回味无穷。气氛到位，让人步步为营的恐怖游戏《绝命异次元》，充满压迫感的环境的气氛，毫不留情的敌人和即时陷阱，锱铢必较的资源控管，加上虽然老梗，但就是特别有用的 jump scare， 带给我一场难忘的求生之旅。经典的塔防游戏《植物大战僵尸》，简单易懂的游戏规则，变化性但深度十足的游戏系统，针对手法全面优化的操作，各种恶搞彩蛋和游戏模式，让我废寝忘食的玩了好一阵子。最后则是让我初次接触到文字 AVG 的游戏《秋之回忆七打勾勾的记忆》，以一个看似平淡无奇、高中生和青梅竹马日常生活为开场，直到意外出现的神秘少女，让许多被埋藏起来的过去一一水落石出。无论是声优演出、CG 图、BGM 和剧情张力都有着很棒的表现。花30多个小时完成全部的结局，也让我从此喜欢上了这种只要一直按 A 就好的游戏。另外，当年第3展微软发布了名为“诞生计划”的感应器，就是大家熟悉的 Connect。那时正逢快放暑假的时候，我看这感觉超厉害的，室友很兴奋的叫我快来看相关的预告片，又让我再度感到眼睛为之一亮。不过，由于一直以来打电动的地方都没有足够的空间，我入手 Connect 已经是在很久之后的事情了。古人有云"风水轮流转"这句话，其实还是有它的道理在。2010年，一款大家都从未想过会推出中文版的游戏，在2月台北电玩展，闪电宣布将推出中文版。消息一出，瞬间在各大网络平台造成话题。没错，这款游戏就是 Final Fantasy XIII。然而，中文版只会在 PS3 平台独占推出。Xbox 3人版的 Final Fantasy XIII 不仅没中文，也预计只在欧美地区发售。更惨的是，欧美版本皆有所趋，即便你有办法拿到游戏片，也无法在台湾发售的 Xbox 360上运行。这一差异对比下来，瞬间让我羡慕加嫉妒的情绪沸腾。当时我还曾气到跑去 Xbox Live 上怒给这款游戏1星评价。即便我根本就没有玩过。好景不长，之后的发展就是微软解散中文化小组，更是让人惋惜。一区原本有推出中文版的游戏，后续的作品反而没了中文版，像《心灵杀手》、《美国梦魇》和《99夜2》。关于 PS3 和 Xbox 3人独占游戏的竞争，不论是《秘境探险3》、《最后生还者》和《超能杀机》，都可见 PS3 已经逐渐崭露头角。但随着步入职场，有了收入后，我也买了 PS3。有了双主机后，能选择的机会多了，不必要的机会就少了。哪边有我感兴趣的游戏，买哪边就对了。纵使一开始跨平台的游戏，我依旧会选择 Xbox 360版。当年《命运石之门》的中文版 Xbox 360版因为某些原因，最后慢了 PS3 版整整3个月的时间。但我就是宁愿等，也要玩 Xbox 360版。只是跨多平台的游戏，唯独就是 Xbox 360版没有中文，这种情况开始不断出现。有几款游戏因为这个情况，让我选择了 PS3 版。在购入 PS3 后不久，将主机正式改朝换代。只是 Xbox 在亚洲市场的退市，并没有随着新主机的问世而有所好转。接着就是大家今日所看到的市场版图了。回忆起曾经在抉择 PS3 还是 Xbox 360的那一刻，或许对于很多新玩家而言，大概很难想象微软也曾有和索尼势均力敌的情况吧。转眼间10年过去了，整个家用机市场因为中文化的普及而比起以前活络了不少。回头再看看陪我入坑的 Xbox 360，原本洁白的主机外壳早已泛黄。翻开主机记录游戏成就的页面，不少游戏上次玩过的日期都是5到6年前了。许多曾在 Xbox 360上玩过的名作，也以更好的品质重新登陆了新世代的主机。而 Xbox One 对360的享有名单，至今也涵盖了绝大多数的名作。虽然这点的确值得肯定，但也让我开启 Xbox 360的机会变得更少了。不可否认的是 ，Xbox 360曾陪我度过那段看似被浪费掉、看似毫无意义的青春岁月。即便是当年购买的点数卡、电玩店拿到的哈手指，都被我保存了起来。有些游戏虽然我在新平台上再买了一次，但原来的版本我还是留着，因为这些都是我的游戏生涯中无可取代的回忆，也是那段满脑子都只有游戏、无忧无虑的日子里，曾经努力玩过的证明。 我对电玩游戏的记忆最早可以追溯到国小的时候，忘记从几年级开始，家里有了一台电脑，我的童年也随着进入数位时代。相较之下，家用主机在我的童年就占据了较少的位置。除了玩过忘记在哪买的盗版红白机和64合一卡带外，另外妹妹曾经和同学借了一台初代 PlayStation。但面对一堆看不懂的日文，10片盗版片里有7到8片都无法正常运行的情况下，最后我对这台主机的印象也只剩那个怎么跑都跑不到终点的百事超人。在那个版权意识尚未普及、烧录机也只有少数人才买得起的年代，不少商人都将未经授权的游戏软体烧入进一张光碟里面，再像是电动游乐场、游戏小站这些俗到不行的名称贩售，就是大家所谓的大补贴。对于只知道价钱和里面有很多游戏的消费者而言，当然只会不疑有他的觉得买到赚到。只是这些未经授权的游戏软体，有些甚至是只能游玩部分的试玩版。因此那时的我常常不能理解，为什么上次爸爸买回来的游戏小站里，不管是漫画地带、阿拉丁还是音速小子，明明就过了第一个关卡，却都会在下一刻又跳回标题画面。甚至我还遇过只能游玩战斗又不能选阵营的《三国群英传》。童年的我虽然不知道自己玩到的只是原版游戏的冰山一角，但还是乐此不疲。连扫墓时长辈教我怎么拿镰刀，我都会，这好像一把半月斩。真是人不中二枉少年啊！除了大补帖外，我的小舅舅那时也提供给我不少好玩的游戏。每次去祖北找他时，最期待就是等他再帮我灌个新游戏。当拿到那张灌有新游戏的3.5寸磁片时，就足以让我开心一整天了。后来大补帖慢慢的比较少见了，但我的游戏人生却没有因此跟着没落，还是在电脑上玩到了不少有趣的游戏，融合了各种游戏方式，独树一格的虚拟人生。玩家将经历一名英雄的一生，从求学时代到步入职场，经历不同的职业再转职，最后挑战万恶的阿修罗王。游戏用类似大富翁掷骰子的方式决定前进的步数，地上又有各种不同的格子，像各种恶搞风格十足的小游戏。RPG 中常见的道具店，如同机会命运一般的事件格，以及本作相当重要的一点，融合了 ATB 回合制，组合抽到的卡牌进行攻击和防御的战斗。对决怪物往往都是以人性的弱点为原型，像贪婪、嫉妒和欲望等等。在战斗开始和结束时，对主角呛声也颇有意思。其他让我印象深刻的，游戏中当主角参加问答比赛或考大学时，还有机智问答这一块，里面问题囊括历史、地理、物理、化学和人文艺术。原本对电动完全没兴趣的老爸看到这个，也兴致勃勃的想参与。除了游戏外，最让我印象深刻的莫过于模式电脑的重灌。但当时的我根本还没有什么备份存档之类的概念。在电脑重修回来后，我开启了游戏，看到原本能打赢阿修罗王的存档变成一片空白，让我留下了不少阴影。幸好后来我在网络上找到了游戏的秘籍，因为这些作弊码就其中制造出数值超全的角色，才让我存档不见的阴影慢慢散去。觉得要打倒魔王太累吗？那你不妨试试疯狂摇摇杯，以经营台湾最常见的手摇饮料店为游戏的主旨。玩家扮演店之长，必须掌握机器和原料的买卖、新品的调配、试喝、命名到定价，还有人事成本的控管、各种市场调查。最让我印象深刻的，甚至还有《仙剑奇侠传》1代主角的女儿李易如乱入，看到那些玩过《仙剑》才懂的对话，瞬间一股又惊又喜的亲切感涌上心头。经营饮料店并不是一件简单的事，游戏发售正好是在千禧年，用网络查攻略的文化正初步成型。因为游戏中的原料实在太多样了，为了把这个游戏玩得更好，我开始上网查询各种饮料的调配法，还发现了一个号称不管卖多贵都会有人买单的花果茶秘方。不信邪的我直接把售价拉到几百块，看到真的卖出去时，荧幕前的我笑得合不拢嘴。另外，也和早期许多 PC game 一样，总是藏各种对玩家有利的秘籍。如果把店名取到这款游戏的合作厂商快可力的话，还能在一开始就有5倍的资金。只是把话题从游戏拉回现实当中，原本有着不少加盟店的快可力，如今在台湾已仅剩少数几家。就跟滑鼠里面的球、录影带用的回带机一样，知道这些东西的，大家都能证明你已经有一定的年纪了吧？想靠不同饮料店的方式发大财吗？那就不得不提同间公司的另一款经典系列《大富翁》。初次游玩这个系列是在 MS-DOS 上的3代，用骰子决定前进的步数，停在土地上便能购买该地。若停留在别人的土地上，就得交过路费。各种小游戏和赌场，以及能害人利己的道具卡片，上了就一定得告人才能离开的法院。除了股票和公司的买卖，这些规则对于当时年幼的我来说，都相当浅显易懂。 因此也是让我投入了不少时间。到了4代，这系列更是全方位的进化，从 MS-DOS 升级到 Windows， 初次使用3D 的人物模型，以及最让人印象深刻的角色语音的加入。
ケチから金を取るなよ。
啊，加派你啊！
钱乃身外之物。
不同国籍的角色说的也是不同的语言，一些像
但本公主想你的，明明没有犯罪。
之类的台词，在语音的加持下，更成为了小朋友们喜爱的梗。4代不仅承接前面几座精致的美术插图、简单易懂的游戏规则，增加可以让指定对象全部遭受特定命运的魔法屋，整个友情破坏的要素比起前作更强了。游戏充满幽默感的风格，也是让人回味再三的原因之一。甚至连像时光机张脑洞大开的道具都有，和亲朋好友挤在同台电脑前，那画面至今能让人历历在目。觉得买房炒地皮很累，只能过普通而平凡的人生吗？那你绝对要玩玩看经典的模拟市民1代。不同于模拟城市复杂的市政规划，模拟市民将焦点放在一个普通的家庭里面。玩家不仅得运用有限的预算帮这户人家盖好一栋房子、购买家具，还得照顾这些模拟市民们的起居、就业、求学、人际关系等等大小事。有赖于游戏提供的秘籍的缘故，那时我几乎都将金钱调到很满，尽情享受盖房子的乐趣。各种豪华装饰品更是放给他满。在看似平凡无奇的生活之下，模拟市民却有着不少天马行空的设定。例如，只要有角色死亡，死神便会跑来带走灵魂。玩家们还可以选择向死神求情。号称能帮玩家实现愿望的神灯精灵，在许了能得到金钱的愿望后，却变出一堆快过期的账单来，让人好气又好笑。充满未来黑科技感的机器人角色，只要玩家负担得起昂贵的购买费用，各种家事保证一手包办，能调配出各种神奇药水的实验桌，甚至还有可能让人变成科学怪人。以上这些当然只是一小部分，还有很多让人感到富含创意和巧思的例子，真的是一时间说也说不完。和其他 PC game 一样，玩家们不仅可以将自己喜爱的音乐放入游戏当中，还可以上网下载各种不同的物件。有些物件可不是单纯只改变颜色和外观，还能够做出像是让指令的邻居被瞬间传送过来、人物状态不减等等正常游玩无法达成的情况，让我沉迷于收集这些奇珍异宝好长一段时间。游戏陆续推出了不少特定主题的扩充包，那个年代还没有线上商城这种东西，所有扩充包都是以实体光碟的形式推出，我只说要欢乐假期游就没得买了。另外，初代模拟市民的 BGM 也是颇受玩家好评的一点，像是在购买模式时充满活力的配乐，建造模式时阴郁的钢琴独奏曲，在社区时轻松悠闲的爵士音乐都让我印象深刻。多年后，我上了 YouTube 寻找当年模拟市民1代的原声带，意外发现了一个颇有趣的现象。一些国外网友表示，因为当年玩到了这款游戏，让他们选择了建筑相关的科系，成为了建筑师。加上游戏对于社会的正面影响，那些对游戏一知半解，还不懂得接纳不同意见的人，是永远不会懂的。最后，这是我童年最喜欢的2款 RPG，《仙剑奇侠传》和《轩辕剑3外传：天之痕》。我对《仙剑奇侠传》的印象最早可以回溯至 MS-DOS 时代，卖电脑的商家还很好心的灌了一些游戏软体进去。某次年幼的我在电脑当中发现了《仙剑奇侠传》这款游戏，当时认得的字还不多，更没提如何让游戏推进进度了。我就只是不断在一开始的客栈中打转，直到一段日子过后，我才知道怎么把那个挡在门口的醉汉赶走。初代仙剑最广为人知的莫为各种难走又复杂的迷宫，于是限定岛取药那边毫不留情的迷宫又让我卡关许久。就算一直断断续续的玩，到了苗人头领早茶那边，也是游戏中的第一场头目战。那时的我既不知道角色死了可以用道具复活，也不知道可以去练功和购买装备。打不赢的我不知道怎么办，就这样暂时的把这款游戏给冷冻了。再次接触到这款游戏已经是高年级的时候，当时已经是 Windows 95的年代，在常去的电脑卖场看到了95版的《仙剑》和攻略本，用压岁钱通通一次买回家。有了这本比课本还厚的攻略本，仿佛多了一名神队友，再复杂迷宫都难不倒我了。多亏了攻略本的服务，我才开始发现像属性相克、搜刮民宅、云移的3万文钱、洗加能力的道具等等的小技巧。游戏中多变的战斗特效，总是让我迫不及待想知道接下来会学到什么招式。特别是初次看到酒神咒时，看到他魄力十足的演出和超高的伤害值，当下只感受到满满的震撼。《仙剑奇侠传》最让人印象深刻的，除了主角李逍遥和3位女角错综复杂的感情关系、优美又富含情绪的配乐外，很多故事中的人物都是如此的写实。为民所苦的韩一仙，担心女儿被误大事的林天南，也有像是在僵尸疫情爆发前囤积糯米，事后高价卖给村民的奸商，看似彬彬有礼的书生刘敬元，却在
year. And as you might expect, off the back of a downside surprise like the one we just got, yields are much lower by 8 basis points on a 2-year. Only 7 minutes ago, the 2-year was at 420 and the 10-year was at 430. We're now down 4 basis points on a session at a 10-year to 424.45. Looking at equities, equity futures still elevated, still up by 0.5% on the S&P, on the Nasdaq up by 0.6. To kick off the conversation, Jeff Rosenberg joins us now over at BlackRock. Jeff, how useless is this number this morning?
Well, that's a good question, Jonathan. A lot of noise in this number between the revisions, between the strike impact, between the hurricane, the BLS not coming out with much clarity on that. So I think the market reaction is to the headline disappointment. We were underpricing to 100% probability on November. I think that makes sense. I think the discussion on the wages and focusing on ECI is probably the bigger story, focusing on the unemployment rate, a more important read-through for the Fed. And I don't think this is going to really significantly change the near-term trajectory. I think more importantly is the longer-term trajectory has been repriced dramatically. And I don't think anything we see in today's data is going to reprice that into 2025 pace of Fed expectations, given the noise in today's data.
Let's bring Mohammed into the conversation as well. Mohammed Al-Erin of Queen's College, Cambridge joins us now. Mohammed, we'd love your early reaction to this. And just tell us, is this noise, is this weakness we can look through?
So my 3 takeaways, and the first one speaks to, is it noise, is it signal? 3 elements on noise, we should look through them: payrolls, labor force participation, and earnings. The 4th one, unemployment, I agree with Jeff, that has more information content. 2 is, if you want to make more of this data, then go beyond the big 4 headline numbers and go into the details. And you need to do that if you're going to derive any economic and policy implications from this report. And then finally, the reaction of the bond market has to do with 2 things. One, as Mike noted, the whisper number was even higher than the consensus 100,000. And as you noted earlier, the balance of risk was on the upside for the market. So what you're seeing is a repositioning that people were hedging a little bit, because the one thing that would have really moved things is a much stronger number, not a much weaker number. And that's something that you noted earlier today, John.
Mohammed, I'm struck by the fact that we've gotten so many revisions and so many unclear numbers that we can't fully rely on. How much are you really taking more signals still from what corporate executives say and from the Beige Book and some of that commentary than some of the numbers that we've been getting out that show and really have led this expectation in markets that there should have been an upside surprise?
So, Lisa, this is a time when you've got to take a very holistic view and also have a pinch of salt added to all that, because we have some major events coming up. Look, on the whole, I think the data are consistent with an economy that's still robust, an inflation rate that is proving somewhat more sticky than you would like, and a major call for the Fed to exit this notion of fine-tuning and go into a world where it has a steady steer on interest rates. It should be cutting by 25 basis points for the next few meetings, and then revisiting after that. It should not be looking to react like it had in July by not cutting, like it did last time by cutting 50 to every basis points. It should just be steady, because this data is going to be noisy, and that's what happens at inflection points.
Jeff, to that point, and a number of different people who've come on the show today and in the past few weeks have pointed to this idea that maybe the Fed could front load rate cuts because they are on sort of this steady steer right now, that they do have room to make rates less restrictive in tandem with inflation coming down. Based on these numbers, is that basically your base case too, that they're going to take this window to front load?
Yeah, if you look at where the market has been moving, it's not really been in the November and December expectations. The Fed's kind of done a pretty good job saying, we're going to front load. There's a debate about whether 50 was a mistake or not. Okay, let's put that to the side. That's behind us. So it's really about the forward-looking 2025, 2026 path. That's been repriced. And I think the story going into next year will be the Fed talking about, hey, we've gotten off of we've gotten started here in terms of normalization. We don't have to go quite as fast because away from today's data, the economic data, yesterday's data, is much stronger than the kind of fears over a very restrictive Fed policy would otherwise say. So they can kind of pull back. Maybe they start to talk about every other meeting. That's kind of in the price. And so I think the Fed's got itself in a better place. We're going to get the front-loaded cuts, 50 last time, 25, 25. And then every other meeting, that's kind of aligned. And then we'll see where the data goes and where the debate on our SAR and how restrictive are we really. The economic data has held up pretty well. Yes, this is a downside disappointment, but the broader message is labor markets have been normalizing. They're not collapsing, they're normalizing. They're still trying to stick the soft landing, and I think the soft landing is still the message.
If you are just joining us, welcome to the program. Just moments ago, 12 minutes ago, we got a big downside surprise on a payrolls report. Came in at 12K. The median estimate was 100. I want to remind you of some words from a speech from Governor Waller in the middle of October ahead of this number. Governor Waller said this at the Federal Reserve. This report will most likely show a significant but temporary loss of jobs from 2 recent hurricanes and a strike at Boeing. I expect these factors may reduce employment growth by more than 100,000 this month. He went on to say, since the jobs report will come during the usual blackout period for policymakers commenting on the economy, you won't have any of us trying to put this low reading into perspective, though I hope others will. So let's do that right now. Mike McKee, you got some more?
Yeah, looking again at the hurricane impact, according to the BLS, the establishment survey was affected for 2 reasons, they say. One is that the hurricanes probably prevented people from answering, and also the survey period, the way they phrase it is it ended several days before the end of the month because of the timing of the month. And so they may not have gotten all the surveys in that even were answered. So we're going to have to look at next month to do it. The survey, as Lisa points out, is the lowest survey response rate, lowest since 1991. And when you look at what the weather is overall, it's understandable. Now, the other part of it is the household survey, and the BLS specifically says that was not affected by the storms. So the number you can trust is the 4.1, Jeff Rosenberg was pointing out, and the number you got to hold in abeyance is the 12,000.
In some ways, do you think this makes the Fed's life just a little bit easier next week? Wouldn't a stronger number have been the bigger problem in the news conference?
Oh, a very strong number would have been something that they would have to have talked around. Now they can say, well, we seem to be on the same path, and unemployment's not going up, and average hourly earnings on a year-over-year basis haven't changed, so we don't have a problem. We can cut.
Unemployment's not going up. Bond yields aren't either. This morning, they're down by 9 basis points on a 2-year. On a 10-year, we're down 5. Just moments ago, 15 minutes ago, we saw 430 on 10s. On 2s, we saw 420. Mohammed, I want to bring you into the conversation on fixed income, because you wrote earlier this week in Bloomberg Opinion the importance of understanding what's behind this move. And we've heard a bunch of people give a bunch of reasons as to what's behind it. It might be the data, might be deficit concerns, it might be policy concerns going into next week. Have you decided on which one it is at the moment, Mohammed? What do you think the dominant factor is going into next week?
I have not, John. I don't think you can, because there are at least 4 influences, and it's very difficult to determine the weight of each. Over the next few days, we're going to have some major developments. We're going to have the Fed recalibrating again. We're going to have the results, or at least we'll know how the vote went for the elections. So we're going to get some important data point. I'm really glad you read out Chris Waller's speech, because he has emerged as the best Fed policymaker in terms of not only assessing what has happened, but telling us what to look at. And I thought what you read out was really interesting. Of course, we may always get a newspaper leak during the blackout period, but I think the Fed right now is looking at this, and I agree with what was said, is that they'll say, you know what, this is not going to influence what we're going to do, and we're going to cut by 25 basis points next week.
Of course, yields are lower, so they might not need a particular person to leak anything out to the market to correct the impression. Jeff, what do you think in terms of the main drivers of the yield rise that we've seen over the past month, the 50 basis points increase across the curve?
Yeah, I'll agree with Mohammed. I mean, there's a lot of cross currents in there, but I would say a big one not to ignore, and it's hard because we're obviously very focused on the prospects of post-election fiscal policy is that the economic data got much better, and you had a very negative, very extreme level of Fed expectations priced into the bond market. So it's a little bit of combination of the bond market kind of getting over its skis in terms of 50s and consecutive 50s and the...
Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to check the Air 5, a new 1:43 scale micro RC drift car by Sniklo. In this quick video, I'm going to go over its features and specs, compare it with the other models by Sniklo, and provide you with my initial feedback after testing it out. First of all, in terms of packaging, the Air 5 comes inside this box. It contains the micro RC car, a new updated radio controller, 4 spare drifting tires, a spoiler, and a USB Type-A to a USB Type-C cable, which is used for charging the internal battery of the micro RC car. In terms of features and specs, the Air 5 is currently the biggest and most powerful micro RC car that was released by Sniklo. It weighs 92.9 grams, its length is 106 millimeters, its width is 44.2 millimeters, its height is 33.5 millimeters, the distance between the right and left wheels is 40 millimeters, and the distance between the front and back wheels is 61.5 millimeters. Here you can see the Air 5 next to other RC cars by Sniklo. These two are 1:76 scale micro RC cars, so the Air 5 is definitely bigger, and the S&T Niva is actually a 1:43 scale micro RC car as well. It weighs about the same as the S&T Air 5, but the Air 5 is a bit bigger. Here is a closer look, and as you can see, the Air 5 definitely has more presence than the smaller micro RC cars. As for the other specs of the Air 5, it features a four-wheel drive system. There is no differential, so the wheels always move together. In addition, each wheel is individually suspended. Just like the other micro RC cars by Sniklo, on the top side of the car you can find a magnetic cover, which is going to enable you to attach an all-in-one FPV camera. This camera was not included with my version, however you can either purchase it separately or get a version that includes it. On the bottom side of the Air 5 you can find a USB Type-C port, which is used for charging its internal 500 mAh 1S LiPo battery. Over here you can find the power switch. Short pressing it is going to turn on the car. Short pressing it again is going to switch it off, and by holding the power switch for about 5 seconds you are going to initiate binding mode, which is indicated by the flashing LEDs. The canopy of the Air 5 is magnetic, and by pulling the bottom side in the following manner you'll be able to separate it from the main body. Pay attention though that the LEDs and the camera connector are connected to the main board using these DSD connectors, so you should be careful when separating the main body from the canopy. Here you can see what it looks like when the main body is separated from the canopy. As far as I can tell, the build quality seems very good. The 500 mAh 1S LiPo battery is protected using these plastic parts, which also protect the main board. These parts are made out of metal, which is important, as in my experience, if they are plastic, they are very likely to break. So metal parts are going to ensure that the car is going to last longer. It's going to be relatively easy to replace these parts, which are used for the suspension system, and as far as I can tell, these are not very likely to break. However, replacing the servo that controls the front steering and maybe servicing other parts of the micro RC car can be a bit challenging. As for replacing the tires, it is done by simply removing the current one by pulling it, and then you can simply push the new one into the wheel. It's very easy to remove the rubber tires, but it's a bit trickier to remove the plastic drifting tires, so you should be careful when removing them as you don't want to damage the wheels. Just to be on the safe side, my advice is when changing the tires is to remove the wheel completely by unscrewing this Phillips screw, and then you'll be able to remove the wheel and safely change the tire. So now, as you can see, I'm able to remove the drifting tire from the rim without adding extra pressure on this part, and I can easily place the rubber tire instead, put back the rim, and secure it using this Phillips screw. Now, by the way, personally, I prefer driving the R5 with the rubber wheels, as driving it with the drifting wheels can be quite challenging, as it doesn't feature a built-in gyro. As for the new radio controller, it is very similar to the older one, and it is now included with all Snicklow's micro RC car. The bottom part is completely identical, so operating the radio controller is done by 3 AAA batteries, which are inserted into this compartment and then placed in the radio controller in the following manner. What is new in the new radio controller is the control of all the trims. So instead of using these buttons for controlling the steering and these 2 buttons for controlling the power, it is now done using these dials. These dials are also going to enable you to adjust the gyro, something which is not supported yet by the R5. So as far as I know, another version which should feature a built-in gyro is going to release in the future, and you can also adjust the steering direction, which is something which is not supported by the previous radio controller. Adjusting the steering direction is still not supported by the R5, so probably it's going to be supported somewhere in the future. And by the way, whenever you are reaching the midpoint, the radio controller is going to beep. So for example, now I'm adjusting the steering. So this is all the way to the right, and this is all the way to the left. And whenever the knob is set to the mid position, it is going to be indicated by a beeping sound. In addition, all these familiar 4 buttons are now located over here, and they are indicated by a label next to them. So this is the matching button. In order to initiate the binding procedure, you'll need to long press it for about 5 seconds, and then the flashing LED is going to indicate that the radio controller is in binding mode. Next to it, you can find the FPV box button, which is going to turn on or off the camera, which is attached to the micro RC car. These 2 buttons control the LEDs. So the chassis button controls the color of the LEDs on the bottom of the micro RC car, and this one adjusts the headlights. Now, on top of these 4 buttons, the new radio controller also features 3 new switches: brake, P1 and P2 switches. Whenever the switches are turned on, it is going to be indicated by an LED next to them. As far as I can tell, the brake switch is not in use by the R5. The P2 switch is not in use as well. However, the P1 button controls the lights. So you can see now the backlights are flashing, also the headlights, and when it is turned off, they are not. Finally, the on and off switch has been relocated from here to here, and as far as I can tell, this new position is more reliable, as in my experience, at some points, it didn't turn on or off the radio controller correctly, and the radio controller just randomly turned off when you either accidentally pressed the switch, or maybe the quality of this switch wasn't good enough. And anyway, the new switch looks and feels much more reliable. Besides these upgrades, 2 things were removed on the newer radio controller. So on the older one, you can find this port for attaching accessories. Probably Snicklow thought that users don't need them, or maybe they just removed it in order to save some space. And on top of that, on the older radio controller, you can find this USB Type-C port for charging the micro SD card. And as you can see, it is no longer present on the newer radio controller. Now, in terms of compatibility, both radio controllers are using the exact radio transmission system, which means that the Air 5 can be controlled using the older radio controller, and the older Snicklo versions can be controlled using the new one. So, for example, now I'm turning on the radio controller, turning on this car, enter bind mode by long pressing the button, and then I'm going to long press the matching button, and now as you can see the micro RC car is bound and I can use it using the new radio controller. As for driving the Air 5, which is of course the most important part, in my opinion, it is very fun to drive. It can get quite fast, and the runtime should be between 30 to 60 minutes depending how much you are pushing the throttle. It can be definitely something that you can take to a mini Z course, and you cannot use it on smaller courses like the 1 to 76 scales micro RC cars. You should make sure that you have enough space to use it in your house, as this is not something that you can use outdoors, and you should only run it on flat surfaces, as you cannot drive it on a carpet even if you're using the rubber tires. As for adding an all-in-one FPV camera, in my opinion, the Air 5 is a little bit too fast to drive it in FPV. Personally, I'm going to get an headache if I'm going to try to drive it with my goggles using the all-in-one FPV camera, but of course, it's up to you, and it's nice to be able to control the camera in FPV or use the camera to record your driving. As I've mentioned earlier, you can expect up to 60 minutes of runtime without the FPV camera, and probably closer to 30 minutes including it, and fully charging the 500